G'day everyone, welcome back to the Toon podcast, the Southern Hemisphere's biggest and best podcast. All things Newcastle United. Finally, Jack, we've got something to talk about. I say welcome to you on this very chilly Tuesday evening here in Melbourne and windy. How are you?
It's chilly here as well. Actually, it was down in single figures this morning, so I had my tights on when I was running. So yeah,
Oh,
it's that time of year. It does get quite chilly here, but it's better for running. I'll tell you that. It's much nicer than running in January.
are you a shorts over tights operator or just the straight tights?
Nah, straight tights this morning. Yeah,
Straight tights.
straight tights in
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Long
We get
sleeve.
out early. You
Yeah,
don't see as many people.
long sleeve t-shirt as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, no. The tights look good, to be honest. Yeah, I felt quite good in them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
I'm a mammal now, middle-aged man in lycra. Love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. All right, that's good. All right, well, enough of the boring tights talk. We're here to talk about Anthony Elanga. 12 months on from our original bid in a panicked last week of the transfer window. We've finally got our man. There's a lot of different reports. I tend to go to the Athletic. It's probably my most reputable reputation, or not reputation, my reputable source for information. And David Ornstein's normally pretty reliable with what he says. So he is reporting a £52 million fee, plus bonuses that are difficult to reach. I'm not sure what they may be, but we've finally got our man after 12 months, but more importantly, 3 transfer windows. We've got a first team signing on.
Yes, we have, and it's been a long time coming. I think there was a sense of anxiety building up. I know that you weren't particularly anxious or worried about how things were looking, but I said about 5 weeks ago that I'd start getting a bit nervous if we got towards pre-season and we didn't have anyone in, and it was because Eddie said that thing about acting fast, and we know that he wants to have the players to work with, all that sort of thing. Like, I never thought there was any risk that we wouldn't get players eventually, and transfer market's difficult, and it seems like this one was held up by some kind of agent shenanigans.
Yeah.
So
it's hard enough.
There's so much that goes on that people who go onto Twitter just don't understand. They just can't get their head around it. There's so many different things that have to fall in place for the transfer to happen. But like you said, he was obviously on the shortlist for a while, Elanga. It's the first time we've signed a right winger in a long time, if you don't count Minte, who was obviously a future one.
Yes.
But it's good. It's good when Eddie knows what he wants. He's very clear about that, and he's decided that he wants Elanga. He likes what he brings. We did try and panic buy him when we had to sell Anderson 12 months ago, and I think the fee was a similar kind of fee then, but
Yeah,
obviously Forest wouldn't
mid
have
to
been able to
high
replace.
40s, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was never going to happen then. So, but yeah, like it's happened before with players, we've played the long game and we've got them in the end. It looks like, barring any disasters. So I think it was just nice. I think everybody needed this. Everybody needed this to just calm down a little bit. And we're still relatively early in the summer, so we'll see what happens from here. But very, very good news.
We are, and like you mentioned earlier, according to the article in the Athletic, that the fee was agreed a little while ago. It was the holdup was, I think, Anthony's changing management groups, and there's obviously a bit of that's my money, no, that's my money kind of thing now. And I believe they got a third party into like a mediator to all right, we'll sort it all out. So I think that's the good thing, is that the clubs had actually agreed a little while back with a fee and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's important too, because they are starting to get a reputation of not paying what clubs want, rightly or wrongly. So I think it's good to have it out there that the clubs had actually agreed on a fee a little while ago. It was this sort of stuff between player and managers, and that was the hold up. So that's important as well. And yeah, like you said, our first right winger, probably since Jacob Murphy, or at least since the takeover has taken place as well. I was, I guess, interested at the back end of the season last year as to which way we'd go in the transfer window, if we'd stick with our kind of policy of buying what looked like sort of early 20s, pre-peak, hopefully, and then not have to pay as much as we could have in a few years' time if they're actually at their peak, and you don't get them for long. And this is 23 years old, so they are, at the moment at least, sticking to this philosophy of buying young, buying below their peak and getting them in their prime. And we might touch on James Trafford a bit later on, but he's very similar age bracket in terms of young and before their peak. So do you think this is the right way to do it, or would you like to see a couple of established sort of, not stars, but pretty good players to come in straight away?
I think with the squad profile how it is, we've got no choice. We need to lower the average age of the squad. A lot of our key players, well, a few of them anyway, are over 30, especially in the defence as well. So Jacob Murphy's 29. He's 30 as well now, actually. So I don't think we had any choice. We need younger players to come in. I think if the right deal was there for the right player, like obviously we were interested in Mbeumo, or seemingly we were interested in him until he told us that he only wanted to go to Man U. So that would maybe have been a different prospect. It doesn't look like that ever really got off the ground if he was clear about where he wanted to go, but that would have been a little bit different. But yeah, I think it's the right way to go. We need to get that average age down. We desperately needed someone in this position, and it's actually, like, when you think about what Eddie Howe has actually done with Jacob Murphy, it's ridiculous. It is. He's managed to turn what was really a very average Premier League winger into a Champions League player and somebody really knocking on the door of England. So I don't even think Elanga is probably going to walk straight into the team based on Jacob Murphy's form last season. But the bench is going to be a bit stronger, and obviously eventually will get the shirt. But whoever comes on out of Murphy or Elanga is going to be good. But the young aspect is important, and I think that's the way that we'll go for the rest of the window as well, unless we're maybe depending on who we try and get as a backup striker or in the midfield. But the big signings, the expensive ones, I think will definitely be these 23, 24 age range.
Yeah. One thing that's very good to know is his durability. He played every game last season as well in a pretty good Forest team. He qualified for Europe, but were probably up to their eyeballs in the Champions League race until probably the last couple of games of the season, and a really key player in that. The fact, and 6 goals and 11 assists in that team, in a team as well that was a very counter-attacking team. So to get them numbers, and Chris Wood had a remarkable season, which obviously contributed to his assist tally. No doubt that could be bigger this coming season with big number 14. Well, that could be a touchy subject. He might not be 14 for much longer, but with Isaac up top, you think that them numbers will at least stay the same, if not improve. I've got no doubt as well Anthony Gordon will be back to his form from probably 18 months ago as well. So he does fit in well to the team and what the team needs and how the team plays, doesn't he?
It does. And if you look at him, his attributes, he's the prototype for an Eddie Howe footballer. He's quick. He's a good character. That's really important as well for our signings. And the Forest fans that have been on social media, I've seen that mentioned a few times. He's a good person. But yeah, his raw pace, his ability off both feet, that's unpredictable. He can be a bit inconsistent at times, but which young player isn't, you know? I think that's what Eddie likes about this as well. He sees a player that he can improve. And if you see the improvement, like we've just said, that he's had on people like Jacob Murphy, Sean Longstaff, you know, there's been plenty of others, Joe Linton, name anyone basically in the squad, he's improved. So if you can get a young player like this who's got high potential, you know, Eddie Howe's an elite football coach. Even his critics would admit that his coaching is probably his best attribute. So he's going to be really excited in what he can bring, and he brings that depth that we need as well. So I just think it ticks a lot of boxes. It's maybe not you know, fans always want like sexy foreign overseas signings, but
yes.
But where are you going to really get like a right winger like that from, you know, who's got Champions League experience, who's the right age? It's not going to happen. So you pay a premium for Premier League experience, and if you can get somebody who's already played at a big club as well, because that's important. He knows what big clubs, or Man United, the biggest club. So he's played there, and he didn't make it there at the time. But I don't think that was
Who
anything to do
has?
with. Yeah, exactly. They're not exactly
Just tell me one person
model.
that's gone there and got better.
They're not exactly a model of a well-run functional football club at the moment. So I think Eddie just like a lot in what he sees in Elanga, and that's why I think it's really important that we got his choice. That's what we needed to do, and it's a good start. Yeah. Definitely a good start.
It is, and I think, like you said earlier about coming in early, I'm not sure what his sort of schedule is with where he finished and when he's sort of due back at training and things like that. But I know you listened to the Dan Byrne podcast on the high performance podcast with Dan Byrne, and some of the insights he gave with Eddie Howe were like, I was absolutely captivated listening to it with the patterns and things like that. So if you can get in soon, he might be able to learn these patterns all pre-season, and he might be in the frame to play in the first sort of couple of games of the season. So yeah, getting in early is really good and really important, and the fact that he can settle in. And he's played 22 times, for Sweden already. So he's already familiar with Emil Kraft, and obviously Alexander Isak as well. He's somehow best mates with bloody Crazy Asula. I don't know how they're friends. I don't know where that's come from, but they've been hanging out quite a bit in the preseason. I've seen a lot of things on Twitter and stuff like that Asula could be the director of football that we've been looking for the whole time to get players over the line. So that's great that he can actually come in and know a few faces and sort of feel pretty comfortable around the team as well. It's probably the biggest things I think for a new player is settling in to the team and the environment, but as well settling into the location and the lifestyle and stuff like that. So the fact that he's been in the UK for a while, that's already ticked that box. And the fact that he already knows, 3 or 4 players already is massive. And I think that settling in period won't be very long at all.
Yeah, I think it's Joe Willock as well. There was some social media stuff going on. Yeah. William Asula, all I can think is that they're both Scandinavian, so maybe they've somehow been, because they haven't been in the same academy or anything like that. So,
no, I tried finding this out today. I couldn't find anything.
I think William Asula just likes everybody. He's just like
he's someone out. Yeah,
but he did that. He posted that the Thierry Henry smiling thing with his own face on it. Like that's just funny, isn't it? Like he's doing a good job, whatever he's doing. He's not even a key first team player himself, but he's obviously been
fringe at best.
He's been in Elanga's ear anyway. So, but that's really important point, I think, around the people he already knows. So you'll feel comfortable straight away.
It is. Go on.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say that's going to stand him in good stead straight away. And he'll settle into the area fine. He's very much a person who's got his head screwed on. That seems to be all of the feedback, and we know that Newcastle put a high value on those players. Like the stuff about, you mentioned Dan Byrne's interview he did. I think it was so interesting because you don't often hear people talk like in that level of detail about coaching, about things that go on. Probably because the managers don't want them to, probably, to give away the secrets. But it's not the first time Burns did that. He did that in after he scored that goal against Leicester in the Cup 2 years ago. And he was saying to Eddie, what was that? Was that a number 3 or a number 4 or something? So he's obviously got these patterns. But that's why Eddie wants players who are malleable as well, who can take instructions on board and who listen to what is instructions and who've then got the ability to go and carry them out as well. So I think that's why it's a really good fit in that sense as well. So the whole package, everything just makes sense with this one.
Yeah, it does. The only issue I've got with it, it's not so much an Elanga issue, it's a PSR issue. And if this transfer doesn't sum up how out of date and out of touch this whole PSR world that we're living in at the moment is, I don't know what will. So the fact that 12 months ago we had to sell Elliot Anderson for £35 million, which is proved to be absolute unders for the season he's had and his form for the England youth team at the Euros, that we had to sell him, otherwise we're going to get fined. And a little over 12 months later, we can go to the same team and buy one of their players for 52 million it's absurd. Like it is absolutely stupid that you can do that. And that just shows how ridiculous that these rules that they have in place are.
Don't forget we're stuck with a Greek goalkeeper as well that nobody.
I didn't want to mention him, but now that you've
that was 20 million on paper. So that means Anderson was valued at 15 million in that transaction, which is outrageous. And then we've gone and given Forest 55. It depends what you read or who you believe. Some say up to 60, some are saying 52 with difficult bonuses. It doesn't matter, it's not our money. So but it's the whole thing. Forest are a club that they sold Brennan Johnson a couple of years ago, but then they missed out on, they got a fine or a points deduction because
they got a points deduction for it.
And then their argument was they sold him later in the summer when they knew they were going to get more money for him, which they did, but that they still got the points deduction. So hopefully PSR is not something that we have to talk about every year forever, and it's not a problem for us anymore, luckily, because nobody wants to repeat. But it is, like you said, it's just the whole thing is just backwards, upside down, back to front. It's crazy, really. And
it's
you just
not fit for purpose anymore.
It. No.
Yeah. It was funny that Brennan Johnson thing. I remember talking to our friend Jamie Martin, a Nottingham Forest fan, and he was saying that they'd been up front with the Premier League the whole time, saying, "Look, we know we're under, but we're going to be over by heaps. So we need to sell for the maximum amount." And they were informed the whole way what was going on, and it wasn't until after it happened that they didn't say, no, you need to do it now. Otherwise, like, there was none of that. And I think that's why they appealed it, because they were kind of like, well, hang on, you've never said anything about this during the whole process, and then after it's done, then you bring it up. Like it was pretty poor form. I can understand why they're as upset as what they were. So that's that. Moving on now, the other, like, when it rains it pours. We haven't had anything for about 2 months, and then we've got a training kit video. We've got a new signing. We've got our first potential outgoing for a fee. This seems like it's got a lot of legs. It's definitely gained legs in the last probably couple of hours. It was floated overnight probably not even overnight. It was this morning, really, wasn't it? That I think David Ornstein broke this story as well about Sean Longstaff going to Leeds, a reported 10 million fee with 2 million add-ons as well for that. It's definitely grown legs since the UK's woken up this morning, and that does seem to be a goer. I think that Longstaff's open to it for a few reasons. I think game time is obviously really important to him as well. He's entering the last 12 months of his contract, and this was the kicker for me, that he wants the club to get a fee for him. And if that doesn't sort of sum up the characters of him as well, but what the club have sort of made and the culture that they've made, I don't know what does. Yeah,
I wasn't taken aback by it, because I think it's expected, and I think it's the right time for him to move. He's, like you say, he's got 1 year left of his contract. He barely had a kick in the second half of the season because Tonali came in and the midfield was so strong. So
yes,
it's even despite that, though, it was quite a shock in a way to see that something concrete's going to happen. There's been rumours about Everton and Leeds. I think
Everton was the one, wasn't it?
Yeah. But I think Leeds is a really good pick for him. Leeds are a good club. They've got a good fan base, and he should be able to improve their team. And if they do get relegated, like promoted teams seem to do, he'll be really, really good in the championship level.
Yeah.
He follows instructions to the T. He's got a lot of Premier League experience. I think that fee is reflective of his contract status, because somebody who's got that level of experience would generally in this market would cost a little bit more, I think.
15 to 20, I think, is probably a fair sort of range, do you reckon?
Yeah, about that, I would say. But I'm not surprised that we're going to accept a little bit less, just because it's a bit like with Elanga, it's just right. It just makes sense. It makes sense for everybody. He'll probably be a bit sad that he didn't manage to nail down more of a first team place, but he's got a couple of the best midfielders in the league, if not the world, in front of him. So that's going to make it hard. And he's struggled a bit when he's not had runs of games. Like when he's come in and out, he's struggled a bit because he lacks that bit of pace and he seems to lack that bit of sharpness. And everybody knows that he's number one scapegoat when anything goes wrong. And so I think that actually shames the fan base a little bit when you see some of the comments and criticism he gets, which I think is completely out of order. And then we'll see those same people in the next few days falling over themselves on Twitter to say how much they love him and thank him and all this stuff. I'm not having any of that shit. Like I've got a few receipts, or you don't even have to keep receipts. What you have to do is search someone's tweets for 3 seconds and you can see everything that was said about them. So there'll be a bit of that going on. But I think it's a good move for Sean. But it will be sad. I'll be sad to see him go. It's disappointing when people who are just living their dream, they're living our dream, everybody's dream. He was bowling for Tynemouth Cricket Club the other day.
I was going to bring that up. I don't know if this is a package and he has to sign a transfer from Tynemouth to join a team in Leeds. I'm not sure how that's going to work, or if he's on holidays, he'll come back home and he can still fulfill his contract with time. I'm probably more intrigued by that than the actual the Leeds transfer, to be honest, because a video popped up again on the weekend. Like, he bowls wheels. He has got some serious pace.
Yeah. No, he's good.
I don't know how erratic he is. Maybe he's another sort of local fast bowler comes to mind with Steve Harmison. So I'm not sure if he's fast and erratic, which is probably more dangerous, because if the bowler doesn't know where it's going, good luck to the batsman knowing where it's going as well. So I'm with you, mate. He's a real not, how would I say it? He does a lot of the stuff that doesn't get noticed. And yes, I agree, he has his limitations when he's on the ball and things like that. But the stuff he does, like, he doesn't have that much of the ball. Like, that's not his job. But the stuff that he was doing, especially when Tenali wasn't in, with like he'd plug a hole if Trippier would bomb on, and he'd fill that hole, and things like that. All the stuff that you don't really pick up that much on the camera unless you look for it, because you're actually watching the ball and watching the play and who's making runs and things like that. So it's that stuff. And I think when Tenali came in and started playing the way he did, and then him and Bruno were able to interchange, and sort of they both wouldn't go, and we didn't need that cover. And if we did, Joel Linton provided it at times as well. And it kind of made his role redundant, because the role was still really important. It's just they were a lot better at all the other stuff than what he was, which meant he found himself out of the team and things like that. So he played a very important role. He scored some bloody very important goals for us. The PSG goal comes to mind. He scored the penalty, I think, in the Carabao Cup this year that put us through.
Yeah.
Did he score in the semi-final a couple of years ago as well?
Yeah, he did.
He scored
twice. Yeah, scored twice in the semi against Southampton.
Yeah. So he scored some really, really important goals for us. So I thank him. I don't know if that sounds stupid from here in Melbourne, that I know he's probably listening to other podcasts in his rotation. He might not get to ours. Maybe if he stays at home and he drives to Leeds for training, maybe we might get a bit of a run in the car. But his service, and like you said earlier, he always seems to be a glue guy in the changing rooms. And we've lost a couple of them this week, and we're really, really hard to replace.
He's really close with Dan Burn, and the similar sort of characters. He listens to what he has to do tactically, and he does it, and he's aware of his limitations. He's got an eye for goal, though. Like some of those goals, and they're the ones that stick in the mind for me. Those 3 games where he scored those goals, but also
late runs into the box. And
it was the game against Arsenal this season, the 1-0, where he came into the team. Tenali dropped out, and it was when they were mixing between them, and the Twitter went absolutely apoplectic when the team sheet came out, and he had an absolute storm. It was his best game of the season. And he was so good in that win. And like I get more satisfaction from people like Sean Longstaff doing well than anybody else, because he's just one of us. He's just a supporter, you know. He's from the area, and that doesn't
Jacob
mean
Murphy's
that.
very similar too. He
Yeah,
grew up a supporter and everything like that. Like,
that doesn't mean that
yeah,
you have to say that they're great all the time, because they're not. They've got obvious limitations. But
yeah,
when you've got a 25-man squad, if it suits everybody, there's place in the squad for characters like this. And this is why, like, you know, people like Mark Gillespie are still hanging around as well, because
yeah,
Eddie Howe is a smart football manager. He's an intelligent people manager, and he knows what it takes to build a culture, and he knows how he places value on players like Sean Longstaff. So he's going to be a miss. He'll be a much bigger miss to the squad in general than the fans realize, and I think that might become apparent. But like you said, it's probably going to be like the things that he does that coaches notice that supporters generally don't. Like, I'm not smart enough as a supporter to notice what he does, but I know that he does do important stuff, because he kept getting picked, and the team kept winning when he was playing, and he kept on scoring important goals. So to have had the career he's had at Newcastle and to have had those goals is really special. And I think we will miss him from the squad when he's not there, and I'll definitely miss him. And I know that he obviously doesn't listen to our podcast, but I hope he does know how appreciated he is and how valued he is by, I think, sensible people. And he can ignore the rest of the bullshit that goes on, because I know that has affected him in the past as well.
Do you know what? I reckon it might be a thing where absence makes the heart grow fonder. So he's at Leeds, and you know, it might be. I think of a Paul Dummett who pops up in the stack, and he'll have every man, woman, child, pet all over him and carrying on. Slated him the whole time he was here and told him how injury prone he was and how shit he was and things like that. But as soon as he left and he wasn't playing for it, he was great, and everyone loved him again. So I've got a feeling that'll be a Sean Longstaff thing, and I could definitely see him once he fit. Like, we're a few years away from now, but definitely coming back to the club in some capacity, whether it's one of them ambassador things or a role in the academy and things like that. I think he'll have a job back at the club whenever he decides to retire.
Just one more thing on Longstaff. Like, there aren't many players whose career I like follow with great interest after they leave Newcastle, but he definitely is one that I'll be checking every week and hoping that he's doing well. And I'll really, really be sad if he doesn't, because I value and I respect him so much, and I think he's played such an important part over the last 3.5 years that I just hope he does know how valued he is. He's a great person, and it's a good move for him, and it's the right time. And let's hope everything goes well for everyone.
Just out of curiosity, who are the players that you used to keep an eye on or still do once they've left?
Not many. Andy Carroll was one, because it's probably the same.
Do you know why? Because
thing.
we haven't had that many people leave, mate. Because we haven't had any good players that people wanted.
It's probably the homegrown players more than, like, obviously people like Minte and like Anderson's one as well. You know, that although that was different circumstances.
That's different. Really that cuts you up every time he plays well.
It does. Yeah. And I'm pleased Anderson's doing well, and I hope he comes back one day. But yeah, it's like it's hard to see because of the circumstances. And then there's others like, you know, Minte left, but you know, and people like, I don't know. You can see like Demba Ba, for example, going and doing well, and it's like, oh, you've noticed it because he used to play for Newcastle. But I'm still invested in Sean Longstaff's career. I think I always will be, just because of what he's done and what he represents, I think, to fans, and also because the amount of shit he got, and he was scapegoated, and I really hate that about that. And like I said, I think that has shamed elements of our fan base. So I really feel like I've defended him, and there's not just me, others have done that as well, and he's deserved it. So
yes, I just before we move on, I feel exactly the same about Australian players who are in the Premier League. So when we were going through what we call our golden generation back in the day, like we had Harry Kewell and obviously Mark Viduka, Lucas Neal, Brett Emerton, all these guys that were playing and playing well in the Premier League too. So we just followed them. And I know people might not have a high opinion of Mark Viduka on Tyneside, but I do. He's one of my favourite players before he played for Newcastle, and then the fact that he got to play for our club was huge. And I know, like you said, his time might not be that fondly remembered, but man, he was such a good bloody player. He could be one of the most underrated strikers in Premier League history for what he did and the way he played and stuff like that. But speaking of strikers, mate, news confirmed yesterday that Callum Wilson's contract hadn't been renewed. There was some murmurings, I guess, that maybe they were sort of in negotiations to maybe give him another year with sort of maybe a pay-as-you-play kind of thing. But in the end, it hasn't happened. How do you think Callum Wilson would be remembered for his time at Newcastle?
I think he'll be remembered largely because of his injuries, unfortunately, which is not not the way it should be. But I was doing a bit of research earlier, and he played on average 26 games a season over his 5 seasons, and he scored 49 goals. So he's got an almost 1 and 2.5 goal scoring record, which is really good. He was the only bright point for a period of time there, along with St. Maximan and Dubravka, probably.
Him and ASM, yeah,
in the Steve Bruce, that was the second Steve Bruce season. And then I'll also remember him though for him and Isak and their interchanging and their swapping in.
The back end of the Champions League season.
The back end of the Champions League season was so
goal
good.
For goal.
He scored 18 goals that season, and I think he scored about 8 or 9 goals in April alone.
Which got him an England call up into the World Cup, didn't it?
Yeah, well, he'd already been. That was earlier that season because the World Cup was in November, so he'd already.
Oh, it was too. Yes.
He'd started the season quite well as well, and then he came back from the World Cup where he got an assist and he got on the pitch a couple of times, and then that was. I don't know. It just worked at the time because they were both fit. They were both pushing each other. They were both high quality. They were playing in a good team. So as well as the injuries, and he's had a frustrating couple of seasons, his body just won't do what he wants it to do. But he will mainly be remembered for all those goals. He's this club's 3rd all-time Premier League goal scorer as well. And I think if you listen to the high performance podcast he did, he's overcome a lot of adversity. He's a strong character. He's had 2 cruciate ligament injuries before he even came to Newcastle. So I think that will stand out as well. His force of character, and Eddie Howe, and he's another one that Eddie Howe loves, because of his character. So I think it's the right time for him to go. He's old now, and his body just can't do what he needs it to do anymore. But I think he could be a useful pickup for someone, and he'll always be fondly remembered at Newcastle, I think.
Yes. When I was doing a bit of research on Callum Wilson before, also saying 49 goals, do you know who else had 49 goals for Newcastle?
I just saw the Premier League. Is it Peter Beardsley or Shola?
No.
Someone.
Kevin Keegan.
Okay, yeah.
That put a smile on my face. So, yeah, I think, I've said this before, for me, I think he'll be remembered as the attacking Woodgate, where clearly his best was as good as anyone's, but unfortunately, the injuries just didn't give us a chance to see him consistently at his best. And I know how highly Jonathan Woodgate was rated when he was at the club, and yeah, that's how highly I rated him when he was fit. He was an absolute machine in front of goal, and like you said, like 1 or 2 when he's fit, he's a bloody good going. And yeah, I'm really interested to see what's next. I really am. I don't know if England's for him. Is probably where my thinking is now. Whether it's an MLS or a Saudi, maybe something like that, where the demand on him isn't as high, and he can maybe play a game a week, bit nicer weather. He feels a little bit better about himself and things like that. But like I said, having listened to the High Performance podcast and his determination, and I wouldn't say how much he rates himself because it sounds a bit wanky, like he's got tickets on himself, but the self-belief he has is remarkable. And you could see it, even without listening to the podcast, you could see it the way he acts and things like that. Like, he's never happy when he's on the bench and he thinks he should be playing, even though we've got one of the best strikers in the world. ahead of him, he still thinks he should be playing and stuff like that, because in his own mind, he sees himself as, a first team player. So I'm really interested to see where he ends up, because, I think in his head, he's a Premier League striker, but I think the rest of his body's screaming out for, no, we just need one a week, mate, and let's recover and a bit warmer and things like that. So I'm fascinated to see where he ends up next.
He's a big alpha male, isn't he? Like that. He's always had that strut. He's got that cockiness. And I remember the game against Burnley where he scored the winner in Eddie's first win, and he was monumental that night. He looked like Alan Shearer that night. Like the way he played, his strength, he held it up.
He was like a force out there.
He was, and we didn't see that enough just because of his injury record, really. But yeah, like he probably still thinks he can play for England in the World Cup next summer.
No doubt, absolutely no doubt.
Maybe again like a Leeds or someone where he can rotate, but he's going to get a bit more game time than he has at Newcastle. But I think his problem last season was he was actually fit for a lot of the season, but he was never going to get in and get the run of games he needs to get sharp. And he's a completely different prospect, but he still came on in the Carabao Cup final, and him and Tonali were doing some nice stuff in the corner. And he was,
I don't know if they've left. They might be still there, actually.
So I'm pleased that he got that moment as well in the cup final, because he dragged us up a lot in that Steve
Bruce
us up. Days. He kept us up in that second Steve Bruce season. And he'd actually scored 10 goals by Christmas, and then he got injured in that first season. So he's a really good striker. He's proper just a good forward, a good old fashioned striker. And he was a good signing for us. 20 million, you'd easily say that's a good value for money.
Great value.
And hopefully he gets a nice move. But I think he'll always be well remembered, and so he should be.
Absolutely. I think it's easy to say now, recency bias and things like that. And I know players do move around a little bit. Like I think he was at Coventry, Bournemouth, and things like that. It's hard to call a club home, if you know what I mean, because I think he'll call Newcastle home. I think when he retires, that I think he'll plant his flag with us and say, no, I'm a Newcastle player or an ex-Newcastle player and things like that. Do you know when I knew he was probably done? You know when he tore his pec giving a high five?
He pulled his teeth.
That's when I probably knew this isn't going to last much longer, mate. If you're tearing your pec doing that sort of stuff, then it's probably not for you. But
there was hope, wasn't there? That because he'd had those injuries, and I checked before, but it was between 2015 and 2017. So right in his peak, he had those really bad cruciate injuries. So there was kind of hope that because he hasn't got the miles in the legs like some others, he might be all right, and he might be able to play for longer. But he was just getting different injuries as well. Like it must have been so frustrating for him.
Jack.
Yeah.
Maybe the miles in the legs were okay, but the miles in the arms and pecs were gone because he'd done so many bicep curls in rehab that he was sort of, his top half has aged a lot more quickly than what the bottom half has. So maybe that was it.
I would encourage anyone to listen to that High Performance podcast, because he talked about his like the psychology as well, and the fact that he had the walls up and he was really hard because of how he was brought up. He was kind of dragged up in the Midlands, and he had difficulty with his family, and there was a bit of like alcoholism in his extended family and stuff. And he basically just he was the oldest sibling, I think. So he basically had to drag himself up. So he talked about the strategies he had to protect himself and the walls he had up, and then that he was talking about seeking help finally as he got towards this end of his career.
In the last couple of years. Yeah,
he's opened up to the idea of having some psychology and some therapy, and it's helped him. So it's just really interesting, a really interesting listen. And you think about him going out of the leadership group and Longstaff, like we've already talked about, and it's a change. It's a change, and people. Surface level, you just look at it and say they're two players who didn't play much, so they won't be missed. But they will be missed in the squad, and they'll have to be replaced in some way. And these are the things that Eddie Howe has to think about that fans don't have to think about. Anyone can jump on Twitter and do like a concept team and stuff, but it's a lot more complicated than that if you want to set a good culture and maintain a good culture, and that's what Eddie's done really well. So yeah, two big misses from the squad in character terms.
Yeah, because all people see is 90 minutes on a weekend. That's all they see of the players, and there's a lot more that goes into them. It goes into team dynamic and all that than the 90 minutes that you see. So they're huge figures off the pitch, probably more so off the pitch than on the pitch these days, and they've left a massive hole that needs to be filled. So we'll leave it there. Hopefully we'll be back soon with someone who's filled one of these holes that Longstaff and Callum Wilson have left. So who do you think's next, mate? What position, quickly before we go, if you had to put your name to a position, what do you think's the next one we get through?
It looks like James Trafford is furthest down the line, and it looked for a while like he was going to be the first coming in. So I would say hopefully that can get wrapped up, and then we can look at potentially we're going to need some kind of cover for Isak, and then we obviously still need a centre back as well. We're going to need midfield cover as well with Sean gone as well. So like we've still got almost 2 months of the window left. There's plenty of time. And now that this Elanga has happened, it's a little bit less. There's a little bit less sort of, and it's just noise really, like the social media stuff. It's not probably felt within the club, but I think I understand why people were a bit concerned, given we've had another director of football left and we hadn't had a signing for so long. So I can understand where the anxiety was coming from, but hopefully this settles things down a bit now. Trafford in next would be good, and then we've got 6 weeks, 7 weeks to look at what else we need to do.
Calvert-Lewin. No.
Calvert-Lewin.
Yes, that's starting to bubble again. It sort of bubbled and then it died down. Now it's starting to bubble again.
So the thing, and it's all about timing as well, because if Calvert-Lewin had been announced before anything else, there would have been absolute hell on. Oh. If he's in that, if we go for him,
there's a goalkeeper.
Yeah, or if there's another, but if we go for him now, I think people will be more understanding of it. And to me, we were interested in him, paying money for him this time last year. So why wouldn't we be interested in him now if he's on a free? If he wants to come, and if he's going to come on a contract that works for us, free transfers can usually demand a lot of money and signing on fees and things. Yeah. But I think it makes a lot of sense. Like there will be a lot of people who don't like that, but like you don't get experience like that at the age he is. He's 28. He hasn't had injuries the last 2 seasons, no matter what people try and tell you that he's injury prone. He's got England experience. I think that this would make a lot of sense, and then we can divert.
Knows the league, everything. Yeah. He ticks all the boxes for a backup striker, and then potentially you can look at someone maybe a little bit younger, or if that's a Sula, whoever it is, if he's a versatile one that can play out wide or play up top as well. I think, to me, it's a no-brainer. If the terms are right, it's a no-brainer for me.
And as with any signing we make, he's going to be coached by Eddie Howe, and that's the other massive advantage that he would get here that he wouldn't get anywhere else. But also means, from a fan's perspective, there's more chance that he's going to succeed. Yes. So I think, it would depend what other offers he has, but I would be more than satisfied if that happened. And then we've got the rest of the window to look at a centre back and
another midfielder cover. I think.
Yeah, midfield cover, and then maybe a couple of younger project type players as well. So
beautiful.
It's exciting, but hopefully the dam's open now, and the floodgates have opened, and we're away, and we'll be back soon to talk about more.
Yes. All right. That'll do. We'll wrap it up. Thanks very much for jumping on, mate. Thanks everyone for listening, watching, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks, mate.
See you next time. Cheers.